If you thought The Simpsons was just a goofy cartoon, think again.
It claims to show a screenshot of a 2002 episode of The Simpsons. It shows Donald Trump touching a glowing orb with two Middle Eastern-looking men. Well, last month, President Trump did just that.
This show has a scary habit of predicting the future with terrifying accuracy, and 2025 is shaping up to be no different. From dystopian tech to environmental disasters, some of their storylines are starting to look a little too real. Are we heading straight into a Simpsons-style nightmare? Let's take a look at the predictions that might just keep you up at night. Trump's presidency. Somehow, this animated sitcom that's been around since the late 80s keeps managing to predict the future. And at this point, it's either an elaborate joke or they've got a time machine hidden in the writer's room. One of the eeriest examples, their spot-on prediction of Trump's presidency and his repeated comebacks. Let's rewind to 2015, when the show released a short called Trumptastic Voyage. The premise? Classic Simpsons absurdity.
Can you hold a sign?
You know it.
$150.
Woohoo!
Homer gets recruited to be a paid supporter for Trump, a not-so-subtle jab at how some political rallies get their energy. But this isn't just about waving a sign. Homer gets literally sucked into Trump's hair, and inside this swirling golden mass, he sees something strange. Campaign posters with dates. Trump 2012, 2016, 2020, 2024, even Trump 2028. At the time, this was just another Simpsons gag, poking fun at Trump's over-the-top media presence. Sure, he'd flirted with running for office before, but nobody actually thought he'd win. Then 2016 happened. Against all odds, and despite half the country thinking it was some elaborate joke, Trump won the presidency, defeating Hillary Clinton in one of the most shocking upsets in modern political history. Suddenly, The Simpsons' little throwaway joke started to look eerily prophetic. Trump wasn't just a pop culture figure anymore, he was the most powerful man in the country. And as his presidency unfolded, filled with controversies, Twitter meltdowns, policy shakeups, and an impeachment, one thing became clear. Trump was unlike any president before him. Then came 2020. Trump ran for re-election, this time facing Joe Biden. The country was more divided than ever, with heated debates over his handling of the pandemic, racial tensions, and pretty much everything else. When Biden won, Trump didn't go quietly. He claimed the election was stolen, lawsuits followed, and the infamous January 6th riot at the US Capitol cemented the chaos of his exit. For a while, it looked like he might fade into the background. But if we've learned anything from The Simpsons' Trumptastic Voyage, it's that Trump never really goes away. Fast forward to 2025, and he's back. The Simpsons were right again. The campaign posters in Trump's hair weren't just a joke, they were a roadmap. Love him or hate him, he still commands an enormous following. And that energy helped him make a comeback that few thought was possible. So now, fans of the show are wondering, is 2028 next? The idea of Trump staying in politics beyond this term isn't that far-fetched. His influence over the Republican Party is stronger than ever, and whether it's him personally running again or shaping the next leader in his image, Trumpism isn't disappearing anytime soon. The man has made it clear he's not the type to step aside gracefully. And let's be real, The Simpsons have been weirdly accurate before. They called Disney buying Fox. They predicted the 2014 Ebola outbreak. They even had a joke about a smartwatch back in the 90s, way before Apple made it a thing. So when they hint at Trump being a recurring name on the ballot for years to come, you have to wonder, is it just satire, or are they really onto something? Because at this point, Their track record is scarily good. Aging filters. During season 31, episode 11, some old man tells Lisa, "You'd be a lot prettier if you smiled." Because if there's one thing girls love, it's being told how to exist by random strangers. Lisa, unimpressed, vents about it at dinner. But leave it to Bart to immediately take the conversation off the rails. He brings up a puberty app that shows you what you'll look like when you're older. Lisa already has the face of someone who disapproves of everything at the table, so naturally, the idea of seeing her future self isn't exactly thrilling. At the time, it was just another ridiculous Bart joke. But fast forward a few years, and yep, it actually happened. The aging filter trend blew up in real life. Suddenly, everybody and their grandma was using apps like FaceApp and Instagram filters to see what their older selves would look like. The idea of a puberty app sounded ridiculous when the episode aired, but here we are, deep into an era where people willingly fast forward to their 60s just for the fun of it. Now these apps don't just slap a couple of wrinkles on you and call it a day. No, they go all in. Gray hair, sagging skin, those little frown lines that show up after years of dealing with life. It's disturbingly realistic. Some people take it as a joke, while others stare at their aged-up face for way too long, wondering if they should start investing in anti-aging serums immediately. And let's be honest, as if we didn't have enough things to stress about, now we get to add future wrinkles to the list. Colonization of Mars. In the Margian Chronicles from 2016, the Simpson family gets picked for a Mars travel program, and because this is the Simpsons, things go off the rails immediately. Homer and Bart do what they do best, turn everything into a disaster. Marge and Lisa, on the other hand, handle the simulation like pros. But just when it is time to actually launch, the whole thing falls apart. Turns out, the Mars mission was not real. It was all just one big, overhyped stunt. Fast forward to 2051, and in the episode's final moments, we see that Marge and Lisa do make it to Mars eventually. It just takes them about 4 decades to get there. Funny at the time, right? Well, fast forward to today, and the idea of humans setting foot on Mars is feeling a little too familiar. If there is anyone who has made it his life's mission to get us to Mars, it is Elon Musk. His company, SpaceX, has been working toward the dream of human colonization on the Red Planet for years. Musk originally aimed to send a crewed mission to Mars by 2024, but shockingly, space travel is kind of complicated. The timeline got pushed to 2026, which, let's be honest, will probably shift again. Because as cool as it sounds to pack up and move to Mars, it turns out that launching a bunch of people 140 million miles away and keeping them alive is hard. Who knew? And that is not even the craziest part. In July 2024, SpaceX ran into a very Simpsons moment. During what was supposed to be a routine Falcon 9 rocket launch, something went very, very wrong. The mission started fine. The plan? Send 20 Starlink satellites into orbit, no big deal. Except when the time came for the rocket's second stage to reignite in space, it just did not. A total failure. The satellites never made it where they were supposed to go. Instead, they ended up useless and were destroyed shortly after deployment. Now, this is not exactly the same as a fake Mars mission, but come on. A highly anticipated, overly ambitious space project falls apart at the last second due to a technical failure. That is about as Margian Chronicles as it gets. The episode literally ends with Marge and Lisa making it to Mars way later than they expected. And let's be real, that is exactly what is happening here. Musk keeps pushing the deadline back. And if this pattern continues, maybe we will get to Mars, just in time for The Simpsons to celebrate its 100th season. Tapped smartphone. In The Simpsons movie from 2007, there is a scene where Marge and Lisa are sitting together on a train when Marge makes an offhand comment. She tells Lisa, "It's not like the government is listening to everybody's conversation." Pretty harmless, right? Just a mom trying to reassure her daughter that they still have some privacy in this world. Then boom, instant cut to the NSA, where an entire room full of agents is sitting in front of giant screens, listening to conversations from across the country, including Marge and Lisa's. The whole thing is played for laughs, a ridiculous exaggeration of government overreach, because obviously something like that would never actually happen. The idea of the government listening in on private conversations sounded like a conspiracy theory wrapped in a joke, except it was not a joke. Fast forward to 2013. Enter Edward Snowden, a former CIA employee turned whistleblower who casually dropped the biggest truth bomb of the decade. He leaked classified documents revealing that the NSA was, in fact, monitoring pretty much everything. Not just suspected criminals, not just high-risk individuals, but millions of regular citizens who had no idea they were being watched. Phone calls, emails, internet searches, text messages, it was all fair game. The government had been collecting data on an unimaginable scale, and we had all been blissfully unaware. Turns out, they had been at it for years. The NSA's surveillance program was not some new post-9/11 thing. It had actually started way before that, nearly a decade before the attacks, under the pretense of international security. They were collecting massive amounts of phone records, scanning for patterns, tracking connections. Then, after September 11th, everything went into overdrive. Surveillance expanded, technology advanced, and suddenly, the government had its digital eyes and ears everywhere. And if that was not enough, the Justice Department and the DEA had their own thing going on. For over 2 decades, they collected logs of nearly every phone call made from the US to countries linked to drug trafficking, including Canada and Mexico. So while we were all living our lives, chatting with friends, calling family, making late-night impulse purchases, the government was quietly keeping track. At the time the Simpsons movie came out, people thought the NSA joke was just that, a joke. Some exaggerated gag about government paranoia. But in hindsight, it was not an exaggeration at all. It was basically a documentary clip hidden in an animated comedy. There is an episode of The Simpsons where Homer's boss unveils a future that is not just coming, but steamrolling its way into reality. Robots are not just helpful assistants or quirky sidekicks. They are here to take jobs, and not just any jobs. Homer and his co-workers are literally being asked to train the very machines that will replace them. That is cold. But in true Homer fashion, he somehow manages to keep his job, though not without some truly bizarre attempts to prove he is still useful. He fakes emotional connections with the robots, tries to outsmart them, and does whatever it takes to convince them he belongs. It was a ridiculous, over-the-top satire of automation, a joke about how humans might desperately try to outmaneuver the rise of AI. But now that joke does not feel so far-fetched. Take a look around. AI and automation are no longer futuristic concepts. They are here. Self-checkout machines are replacing cashiers. Factories are running on robotic arms. AI assistants like Siri and Alexa are handling everything from scheduling meetings to cracking jokes. And it is not just simple tasks. AI is writing articles, coding software, creating music, diagnosing medical conditions, and even making art. Companies like Boston Dynamics are building robots that can run, jump, and carry out complex tasks. Google and Microsoft have AI programs that can pass medical exams, write movie scripts, and generate images that look like they were painted by actual humans. And every time a new advancement hits, the question gets louder: which jobs are next? But just like Homer refusing to roll over and let the robots win, humans are not backing down without a fight. There are massive pushes for retraining programs, discussions about AI ethics, and even calls for regulations to prevent AI from completely taking over certain industries. The reality is, for all its efficiency, AI still lacks something that makes human workers unique: intuition, creativity, emotional intelligence. I can analyze data and make predictions, but it does not understand feelings. It can mimic artistic styles, but it does not have personal experiences to draw from. Still, the big question looms: how much are we willing to let machines do for us? At what point does convenience turn into full-on replacement? Climate change. In the Simpsons movie, Springfield is on the verge of a full-blown environmental collapse, and Lisa is the only one taking it seriously. She warns everyone that their pollution is getting out of control, but big surprise, nobody listens. The town keeps dumping waste into the already toxic lake until it reaches a breaking point. Next thing you know, the EPA swoops in, drops a massive dome over Springfield, and suddenly, Lisa is not just some annoying kid rambling about the environment. She was right the whole time. Now let's talk about the real world, where Lisa's worst-case scenario does not seem so ridiculous anymore. It is 2025, and the planet is not doing great. Climate change is not some distant, hypothetical problem. It is happening now, and the signs are getting harder to ignore. Just look at what went down in Antarctica in 2024. A huge section of the ice shelves broke apart, an event scientists had been dreading for years. These ice shelves help hold back massive glaciers, so when they collapse, all that extra ice starts melting into the ocean. And guess what that means? Rising sea levels, more flooding, stronger storms. We have been hearing about this for decades, but now it is playing out in real time. Just like Springfield ignored Lisa's warnings, humanity has spent years brushing off scientists saying, "Hey, maybe we should stop pumping the atmosphere full of greenhouse gases before things get worse." And now, things are worse. Rising temperatures are fueling more intense wildfires. Hurricanes are getting stronger. Droughts are dragging on longer. Whole ecosystems are changing, and we are barely keeping up. The Arctic is melting faster than predicted. Coral reefs are dying. And yet, despite all of this, the world keeps dragging its feet on serious climate action. It is almost like we are waiting for some real-life EPA to drop a dome over us before we finally get the message. At this point, Lisa Simpson does not even feel like a fictional character. She is every climate scientist, every activist, every person screaming into the void, while governments and corporations pat themselves on the back for making tiny changes that do not even come close to solving the problem. We are way past the "hey, let's all use metal straws and reusable bags" phase. This is full-scale, civilization-altering climate change, and the longer we delay real solutions, the harder it is going to be to fix. And the worst part, we might not be able to fix it at all. Scientists have been warning about tipping points, thresholds where the damage becomes irreversible. Once enough ice melts, once enough carbon is trapped in the atmosphere, there is no going back. At that point, it is just damage control. less about saving the planet and more about figuring out how to survive on one that is completely different from the one we have known. Neuralink. In Bart to the Future, an episode from The Simpsons that aired in 2000, Bart gets a rare, unsettling glimpse into what his future could look like. And let's just say, it is not the fun, rebellious adventure he probably imagined. Things are bleak, his life is a mess, and the world is not doing much better. But the weirdest part, at one point, he stumbles upon what looks like a gun, only to realize it is something far stranger. It is a device that taps directly into his brain, linking him to a neural network that feeds him real-time information. Suddenly, he is pulling up news and updates straight from his mind. No phone or computer needed. Just a direct connection between his thoughts and the digital world. This was just a gag back in 2000. A weird, futuristic twist thrown into the episode for fun. But now, in 2025, we are getting dangerously close to making something like this a reality. Technology that can link human brains to computers is not just some sci-fi fantasy anymore. It is actively being developed, tested, and if companies like Elon Musk's Neuralink have their way, potentially used in humans sooner than we think. Neural interfaces are already here. Researchers have developed brain implants that allow paralyzed individuals to control robotic arms with their thoughts. Others have successfully tested devices that translate brain signals into text, letting people type just by thinking. The idea is that eventually, these technologies will become so advanced that they could let anyone interact with the digital world in ways we have never seen before. Instead of reaching for your phone to check the news, you could just think about it and get the latest headlines beamed straight into your brain. And that is where things start to get weird. Because sure, using your mind to Google something in an instant sounds cool, but what happens when that technology evolves? What happens when it is not just you searching for information, but information being fed to you in ways you cannot control? If a neural implant can stream updates directly into your head, who decides what you see? Who controls the data? Right now, companies like Neuralink claim their goal is to help people with disabilities. And that is great. But let's be real. Once the technology exists, it is only a matter of time before people start looking for other uses. Imagine corporations pushing ads straight into your brain. Governments monitor thoughts in real time. Hackers figuring out how to access your neural feed. A future where the line between human thought and artificial intelligence gets so blurry that we are not even sure where one ends and the other begins. Bart freaked out when he realized what that device could do. And honestly, maybe we should be freaking out a little too. Because if the past few decades have taught us anything, it is that the tech industry moves fast. Faster than most of us can keep up with. And before we know it, we might be looking at a world where brain-machine interfaces are as common as smartphones. Flying cars. In the 2005 Simpsons episode Future Drama, Bart and Lisa get a rare look at what their lives might be like years down the road. And let's just say, the future is pretty wild. Hover cars zip through the skies. People casually fly from place to place. And Springfield has somehow managed to embrace a world where the roads are no longer the only way to get around. It was a fun, over-the-top vision of what the future could look like. Except, here we are in 2025, and flying cars are no longer some far-off fantasy. They are happening. Companies like Samsung Sky have been working on vehicles like the Switchblade, a car that drives like a normal vehicle on the road, but unfolds its wings and takes to the sky when needed. And it is not just them. Other companies are deep into the race to build personal flying vehicles, and if things keep moving at this pace, we could be looking at a world where owning a flying car is as normal as having a Tesla. That sounds incredible until you start thinking about what that actually means. Right now, we can barely handle regular traffic. People lose their minds over rush hour, and that is with designated lanes, traffic lights, and rules that, at least in theory, keep things organized. Now imagine all of that chaos moving upward. Instead of streets, we have layers of flying cars zipping in every direction, dodging buildings, avoiding each other, and hoping they do not crash into someone's rooftop. It is not just about whether the technology works. It is about whether we work with technology. If history has taught us anything, it is that humans are really good at creating cool things and really bad at figuring out what to do with them. Look at self-driving cars. We were promised a future where they would make driving safer and easier. Instead, we got half-baked autopilot systems, random accidents, and a whole new list of problems no one was ready for. Now take that same energy and apply it to flying cars. Who is in charge of regulating them? Do you need a pilot's license to fly one? Or is it just another vehicle you can buy and take off with? How do we prevent mid-air collisions? How do we stop people from just flying away when they do something illegal? The moment we open up the skies for everyday traffic, we are looking at a world where the rules are not just different, they are completely untested. Hologram. In Back to the Future, Bart gets what might be the weirdest piece of mail ever. Instead of a regular paper invitation, a futuristic hologram pops up right in front of him, delivering a message about a gig for his band. But the part that really gets him? The message ends with "smell you later" instead of a normal goodbye. Bart just stares at it, baffled, before saying, "I can't believe 'smell you later' replaced goodbye." It was one of those throwaway gags meant to poke fun at how ridiculous the future could be. A world where people casually use holograms and talk like that. Yeah, right. Except, here we are in 2024, and holograms are creeping into reality faster than anyone expected. Companies have already developed HD 3 holograms that are popping up in stores, on stages, and even in business meetings. And they are not just cheap, grainy projections like the ones used at concerts years ago. These are high-definition, interactive, and getting eerily lifelike. Give it a few more years, and we might be looking at a world where FaceTime and Zoom are completely outdated. Why settle for a flat video call when you can have a full-on 3D version of someone standing right in front of you? Clones. In Treehouse of Horror 13, Homer stumbles upon what might be the laziest solution to all his problems, a magic hammock that clones anyone who uses it. Instead of, thinking through the consequences, he does what any man looking to avoid responsibility would do. He clones himself. Then he does it again and again, until Springfield is overrun with an army of Homers, all just as dumb and lazy as the original. Chaos follows because of course it does. It is a ridiculous, over-the-top take on cloning. But beneath the absurdity, it raises a question we are all going to have to face eventually. What happens when cloning becomes real? Fast forward to today, and while human cloning is technically illegal, cloning technology is advancing at a speed that makes you wonder if some secret underground lab is already light years ahead of what we think we know. Back in 2022, Chinese scientists successfully cloned a rhesus monkey using somatic cell nuclear transfer, the same technique used to clone Dolly the sheep. That might not sound like a big deal until you realize just how close monkeys are to humans in terms of genetics. What other things will Simpsons predict next? Maybe they really do have a secret time machine.